So 2 days down and 1 day to go. We've now completed rounds 2 and 3 of the 2016 NFL Draft, and it was still an interesting and fun night of draft viewing for me. It most certainly was. And I thought a lot of teams did well for themselves, some teams maybe not so much. But it was a good overall night. There was a lot of good talent in that second and third round draft range in this draft, and I think you saw that play out as the two rounds progressed all throughout Friday night. One thing that really stands out to me when talking about this second and third round is when I look in particular at the second round, and that the first 10, 12 picks to me all made pretty good sense for the teams. Usually when you get to the second round, you'll see one or two screwball picks early, and you're like, why the hell would a team reach on them, or why did they take this guy when you have clearly better talents on the board? Most of the first 12 to 10 picks in round two made quite a bit of sense to me and really have no gripes about them, no complaints about them. I could see the thought process, the logic behind each team taking who they did when they did. So that was good to see. And in general, not a lot of massive reaches throughout the 2 days. Sure, there were some bad picks, some questionable decisions. There always is going to be, and some of them end up being wrong, and some of them end up being right. But I thought in general between the 2 days, I actually thought rounds 2 and 3 were more well executed by NFL teams than round 1 was in many ways, if we want to be honest about it. More of these teams maybe should have tried to get second and third round picks because in some cases they did a lot better than they did with round number 1. But anyways, I digress. So let's talk a little bit about day 2 of the 2016 NFL Draft and what happened in rounds 2 and 3. Now, a couple of the big storylines heading into that night were going to be Myles Jack and his massive fall out of the top 5 and 10 of this draft. Now he was available at round number 2. Who was going to get him? Who was going to take him? Jaylon Smith with his big knee injury. What was going to happen? Who was going to roll the dice? Who was going to take the gamble? Was he going to get taken on this night? Well, we got our answers very early. The Dallas Cowboys, with the third pick in round 2, said, F it. We're going to take Jaylon Smith. Now, I know there are going to be Cowboy fans because there always are going to be fans of a team that sit there and say, we want a draft pick with immediate help that provides an immediate contribution. But I applaud the Dallas Cowboys for doing something sensible here. You have, in theory, potentially another top 5 or top 10 talent out of this draft class that you just got in round number 2. Now, maybe in that case, I would have taken Myles Jack over Jaylon Smith. With that said, though, it is really hard for me to knock this pick. I really applaud the Dallas Cowboys again for taking the right guy here because it's not about drafting for right here, right now. If you're in that type of mindset and that type of philosophy, you're never going to get anywhere. And ultimately, the teams that do employ that type of draft philosophy tend to be the ones that end up picking high in the draft every year because they just don't get it. They're trying to plug and fill immediate needs, and they're not looking big picture. They're not looking at the best talent. They're not looking at the guys that have the most growth potential in their game and the most likely to contribute in a big way at the NFL level. Well, Jaylon Smith, even coming off of that massive knee injury, has the chance to be a big-time NFL player. And I suppose if any team was going to know what they were getting themselves into, it was going to be the Dallas Cowboys because I believe it was their team doctor that actually performed the surgery on Jaylon Smith. So at that point in time, you want to trust the judgment of that team doctor or team physician, and you want to look at the talent and you say, it's a great moment for Jaylon Smith. I'm happy for him. Maybe in theory it would have worked out better if he was taken a little bit lower just because then he would have gotten more money on his loss of value insurance policy. But I think at the end of the day, he'd screw that. He still gets a bit of money tax-free from that. He wants to be able to go play football. Now he knows where he's going, and really he's stepping into a good situation because come 2017, you sit there and he could play weak side, he could play middle linebacker. He's going to be a stud. I'll stand behind that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I won't be the only one that's wrong about it. But I'm gonna believe in the kid and wish him the best. And I applaud the balls of Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and that entire Cowboys scouting department and front office for making the right call here. And then you look at the Myles Jack pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now here's a team that coming into this draft, the debate was whether they take Jalen Ramsey or Myles Jack at number 5 if both of them were available. That was the debate. Now they're in a situation where they got both of them. Both of them. And all it took for the Jaguars to ensure that they got Myles Jack was to trade up a whopping 2 picks in round number 2. I think they gave up like a 5th or 6th rounder. You make that deal 100 out of 100 times. The fact that they got Jalen Ramsey and Myles Jack out of this draft is absolutely insane to me. When you want to talk about a Jaguars organization that last year seemed to draft pretty well, and people want to look even 2 years ago and thought drafted kind of well, you know, now you get to a point in time they needed difference makers on that defense. And they instantly, I think, got 2 difference makers on their defense. Guys that, frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if by 2017 are the 2 best players on said defense. They got 2 top 6 talents out of this draft on the defensive side of the ball. Guys they really need. They got their Richard Sherman type. They got their Bobby Wagner type. Look out for the Jacksonville Jaguars because this was a hell of a coup for them to have Myles Jack fall into their lap in round number 2 when he had absolutely no business being there. I was expected to be a bit of a quarterback night, and that really didn't manifest, and I'm not that surprised. Day 3 is going to be a little bit more quarterback heavy. You still had Christian Hackenberg going round number 2. You had Jacoby Brissett and Cody Kessler going round number 3. I think some people are surprised that names like Cardale Jones or in particular Connor Cook didn't get drafted. I don't know why. They clearly didn't do their research. Those were day 3 talents all along, and that's where they deserve to be drafted, period. And I'm sure they will hear their names called at some point in time on day number 3. Now, in terms of this particular night, in terms of the 2nd and 3rd round, let's look at some of the best trades, the most notable trades. I look at Jacksonville. They traded up from 38 to 36, gave up a pick that doesn't fucking matter in the grand scheme of things to go get a top 6 talent in this draft in Myles Jack. Again, you do that 100 out of 100 times. If I'm rolling the dice on anybody in round number 2, I'm rolling the dice on Myles Jack even more than I would necessarily a Jaylon Smith. A phenomenal move by the Jacksonville Jaguars. You had to go get that guy, and I think at the end of the day they knew it. And the great thing about it is they didn't sit there and get antsy and say, hey, we need to go to where Cleveland's picking and maybe give up a 4th rounder to do that. They were able to stay patient and only had to move up 2 slots to the Ravens who weren't going to care. They weren't going to take Myles Jack. So just a phenomenal trade for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Chicago Bears moving back from 41 to 49, and then again from 49 to 56. They put themselves in a position where they now have 3 4th-round picks. You're also talking about a team that, while a lot of people want to sit there and say, hey, you know, why did you give up a 4th rounder to go get Leonard Floyd when he would be there? Of course, that was ridiculous. He wasn't going to be there based off of what you saw, how the draft played out, in particular what the Giants did at pick number 10. The Bears to be able to get additional picks like that, get somebody that they feel addresses a need in terms of the interior of their offensive line with Cody Whitehair. You know, I wasn't as okay with that pick at first, but when I turn around and see who they got in round number 3, I start to like the smell of the Cody Whitehair pick a whole hell of a lot more. And to be able to get yourself 3, still what you would classify as at least quality picks in the 4th round, it was a hell of a coup and a hell of a performance by general manager Ryan Pace and really starting to piece together a 2nd consecutive solid draft, in my opinion. And then I look at the Minnesota Vikings to be able to sit there and go from 86, yeah, they went all the way back to 186, in theory, but to get the Miami Dolphins to panic because they left Leonte Carroo so much, and to get a 3rd and 4th rounder next year, where you want that draft pick currency down the road. When you're the Vikings, you don't have a ton of needs right now. So do you want to waste all of those picks this year knowing that several of them may not contribute for years, may not even make your roster? No, let's punt the ball down the road. Let's put ourselves in a good position of power in next year's draft. Now you're talking about a Vikings team with a 1st, a 2nd, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. I mean, that's a pretty good position to be in for the Minnesota Vikings. And come next year, if you determine you're 1 or 2 players away, you've given yourself a lot of flexibility to be able to go up and get 1 or 2 of those guys because of those extra picks you acquired from Miami in this deal. Just a phenomenal trade, in my opinion, how the draft should be worked on day 2 of the draft, especially in a situation like Minnesota. This is something that a good organization that is well run in its front office would do, and that's what the Minnesota Vikings did. Now, taking a look at the picks, looking at the best picks at day number 2, and this is in no particular order. Jaylon Smith, Dallas Cowboys. Before the knee injury, a top 5, no worse than top 10 talent in this draft. The Cowboys got him at pick number, 34? I mean, knee injury or not, it's worth the gamble every time. Myles Jack at pick number 36 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Need I say more? I really like the selection of Michael Thomas to the Saints in the second round. I thought for them and what they utilize out of their wide receivers and what he brings to the table, I thought he was a really, really good fit here. And while I had other receivers more highly graded that were still on the board, for the New Orleans Saints and for what they do, and sometimes this is what matters. You know, I do a big board, but for different teams, it could look in different ways. I thought Michael Thomas was a tremendous value pick for the Saints in round number 2, and I would expect him to contribute immediately as a rookie. Jason Spriggs for the Green Bay Packers. The Packers cockblocked the Bears on this one, frankly, and traded up to 48 to go get an offensive tackle. I know some Packer fans are bitching and moaning because they're like, he can't play right away. You got Aaron Rodgers in his prime. You need somebody that helps right away. Again, this is where we're talking about that big picture philosophy. You're talking about several starters on that Green Bay offensive line that are going to be free agents after 2016. On top of that, where you have a problem with the Green Bay Packers offensive tackles where they're good on technique, but they're poor on athleticism and foot speed. Now you've got Jason Spriggs, a guy that you could bring into the system. You could teach him technique. He's got that natural foot speed and athleticism. So maybe it's not till 2017 that he really contributes, but when he does, maybe he's that lockdown left tackle to protect Rodgers' blindside for the rest of his career. So big picture, the pick makes a lot of sense, even though a lot of Packers fans are trying to look at this in a narrow window of we want to win a championship now. You also got to look long term. That's what NFL teams do, and in particular good, well-run NFL organizations like the Green Bay Packers do. I really liked Seattle peeling up from 56 to 49 and getting Jarran Reed. There was a part of me that said, hey, I wouldn't have minded the Chicago Bears staying put and taking Jarran Reed. You know, I'm surprised that he fell that far. I think part of it was that he was a solid player, good against the run, but teams questioned his pass rush potential. Well, now he goes to Seattle, and you don't really care much about the pass rush production. He could come in and be an early down and goal line run stuffer. Maybe occasionally you could put him in there, and he'll develop into a better pass rusher. But worst case scenario, you've got yourself a 2-down starting defensive tackle with championship experience. It was a really solid pick on a night of solid picks, in my opinion, for the Seattle Seahawks. Tyler Boyd to the Cincinnati Bengals. Number 4 wide receiver on my board. The Bengals got him in late round number 2. It was back-to-back picks where I thought they got really, really good value. William Jackson, round 1. Tyler Boyd, round 2. It would seem to be, in a lot of ways, a great compliment to A.J. Green on the outside. Yannick Ngakoue for Jacksonville in the 3rd round. Jaguars fans, if you haven't peeped this dude out much, you're going to love him. Yes, I know he's not great against the run, but you're talking about a 3rd round pick. You want a guy that can rush the passer. Ngakoue can rush the passer. He put up some big performances in the Big Ten against some big-name tackles. I look at guys like Taylor Decker and Jack Conklin and Brandon Scherf. All first-round picks, and Ngakoue played well against all of them. This is one of the best value picks on day number 2 that anybody had once you get past the big names like Jaylon Smith and Myles Jack. Ngakoue could play that Bruce Irvin role. Maybe he just plays the Chris Clemons type of position. He will be an impact pass rusher, in my opinion. This was a phenomenal pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars in round number 3, even though I thought Ngakoue probably was best suited to play outside in a 3-4. With what the Jaguars do and what they want out of their strong side back or their sandback or what they want out of their Leo player, Ngakoue fills that role perfectly. Jonathan Bullard to the Chicago Bears. To me, once Myles Jack went off the board, Jonathan Bullard was the best available player remaining until the point in time that the Chicago Bears finally drafted him in round number 3. I'm not going to lie, in round 2, I got a little pissed when they took Whitehair because I said, God damn it, Bullard was still on the board and you had already passed up on Reed. I didn't think Bullard would make it to that pick. Bullard made it to that pick. When people want to talk about Jaylon Smith and Myles Jack, those were phenomenal second-round picks. In terms of pure value, one of the very best picks in this third round was Jonathan Bullard. And frankly, to walk back a little bit on what I just said about Ngakoue, Bullard was the best value pick in round number 3 because he was still the best player on my board. I mean, he was 9th on my big board, and the Bears are getting him where the hell they got him in round number 3. They got him in the 70s, for Christ's sakes. What a phenomenal steal. Kendall Fuller to the Washington Redskins, a team that's had a good first 2 days. Kendall Fuller, some teams thought would be a late round 1 pick, early round 2 pick. A lot of people thought that. Here they are in the end portion of round 3, and they're getting this guy. Now, is he going to play corner or is he going to play safety? I think it's a valid question. But, man, the Redskins are going to have fun trying to figure out the answer to that question. What a great pick. And then C.J. Prosise, Seattle Seahawks, my number 2 running back on the board, a top 35 talent. They got here at what, pick number 90? 90! A combination of him and Rawls in that backfield for Russell Wilson as Seahawks offense sounds pretty appealing to me. I thought that was a really, really job well done by the Seattle Seahawks, getting a guy like Prosise where the heck they got him at. Now, in terms of teams that did well and not so well, let's talk about them quickly. I've liked so far in the first 2 days is what I'm talking about here, the entirety of the picture as we have it so far. The Dallas Cowboys with Ezekiel Elliott, Jaylon Smith, and Malik Collins. I like Malik Collins quite a bit. A good fit for their system, the type of 3-technique tackle that you take in the middle rounds of a draft that ends up being a starter. I think they got 3 future long-term starters, and that's what you look for to me most years out of a draft. You want to be able to say you got at least 3, if not 4 starters. The Cowboys long-term are 3/4 of the way to having 4 starters out of this draft. The Jacksonville Jaguars, what more can be said? Jalen Ramsey and Myles Jack, they got both of them. Instead of having to choose between one of them, they got both of them. And then you throw Ngakoue into round 3. Mwah! Magnificent draft for the Jaguars. One of the clear-cut big winners. I personally like the Chicago Bears draft, getting a long edge rusher with athleticism like Leonard Floyd. I'm going to trust Vic Fangio's judgment here. He knows what he's doing in the 3-4 better than a lot of us do. I happen to like Leonard Floyd as well. I thought it was a good pick, and giving up a 4th-round pick in the grand scheme of things, the Bears recouped that and then some on day number 2. So a good job of understanding the draft board and understanding where they were sitting and what was going to be there to be able to not just pick good players, even when you throw in a white hair who might at some point in time start at center or left guard for them. But then you throw in a Jonathan Bullard in round 3, a top 10 talent to me in this draft. They got him in the 3rd round, and they're in a position now they got 3 4th-round picks. A really, really solid day 2 for Ryan Pace. The Detroit Lions are one of those teams to me that haven't had a sexy draft. I think they've just had a good draft. And that's what they needed to do this year. They needed to improve their offensive and defensive lines. And with their 3 picks they have, Taylor Decker, solid. A'Shawn Robinson, for them, solid. Graham Glasgow, solid. I mean, 3 guys that are potential starters for them by 2017. That, again, is a good draft class. The Washington Redskins talking about 3 starters, maybe even in 2016 potentially. Josh Doxson, Su'a Cravens, Kendall Fuller. 3 really solid picks. I mean, just a really good job by the Washington Redskins of piecing their board together, being patient, a team that you would have thought maybe would have been peeling back, and we would have applauded for trying to move back and get additional picks because there's a 3-year stretch of time from 12 to 14 where they missed out on a lot because of the RG3 deal. They need to recoup some of those picks. Well, trading back sounds nice in theory, but if you get Josh Doxson, Su'a Cravens, and Kendall Fuller in the first 3 rounds, why bother trading back? You've got 3 future starters there. I look at the Seattle Seahawks. Some people might look at Ifedi in round number 1 and say that was a reach. I think it was a reach too. However, looking at the system that they run in their offensive line and flipping him inside to guard, that pick is not that bad. And at the end of the day, you had to improve the protection for Russell Wilson, period. But then you look at round 2. They move up and go get Jarran Reed. A guy that, as I talked about before, really fits their defense and, if nothing else, is a valuable starter for them as a run stuffer pretty quickly. Then in the 3rd round, to get C.J. Prosise and Nick Vannett and Odiambo. I mean, you got 3 guys that can contribute. Prosise should be able to contribute immediately as a change of pace, if nothing else, to Thomas Rawls. Maybe at some point in time even takes over as a starter. Vannett, you've got Luke Wilson entering the contract year, Jimmy Graham coming off of the torn patella tendon. Nick Vanett is a solid player. If Graham comes back 100%, then you've got a solid blocking tight end that allows you to do more with Jimmy Graham as a pass catcher. If Graham doesn't come back healthy, then you've got a solid all-around underrated tight end in Vanett who could be a starter for you. And then Odiambo is just another example of acquiring more depth for the interior of an offensive line that needed more depth and length and strength and talent on the interior of the defensive line. I'll take the Cleveland Browns, too, as a team that had a solid first 2 days. Getting Corey Coleman and being able to take the 8th pick and turn it into Corey Coleman, a third-rounder this year, number 76 overall, and a 2017 second-round pick. That's a really good job of understanding the draft process and making the most out of your draft position. I'll look at Emmanuel Ogbah. Solid pick there at the top of round 2. I would have taken Myles Jack. I might have, because of the position they were in, thought maybe I should take a risk on Jaylon Smith because I've got so many draft picks the next couple of drafts. But Ogbah's a solid pick. I like the pick of Carl Nassib as well. Now, I find it interesting that they went with 2 pass rushers like this. And where's Nassib going to play? You almost wonder, are they switching to a 4-3? But they're going to stay in a 3-4. Ogbah, I think, is actually best suited to play end in a 3-4. And I think Nassib could play end in a 3-4 if you want to call me crazy or not. Or maybe you stand him up and he's an edge rusher for you. Who knows? But you look at it, and I thought they just had a pretty solid draft. Sean Coleman in round number 3, a guy that could start for them at right tackle, and you love the story, and you root for a kid like that. Now, the Cody Kessler pick, it depends on the perspective you look at it with. If you're looking at it as Hugh Jackson loves strong-arm quarterbacks, so of course they took the weakest-arm draftable quarterback they possibly could, that draft pick seems stupid, especially when you had stronger-arm guys on the board. And granted, in that position for the Cleveland Browns, to me, a quarterback like a Cardale Jones, a quarterback in particular like a Kevin Hogan or a Jacob Coker would have made more sense. Big picture, if you look at it, if Kessler, worst case scenario, is a long-term backup for them, and that's what the perspective they're viewing him from, and they're saying next year or 2018 is when they're going to go get that quarterback, then this pick isn't as bad. I don't think it was great. I don't think you should be drafting with that philosophy, but I can't imagine, even though it is the skid marks, that they would be drafting Cody Kessler here, envisioning him being their long-term starter. I just can't. But even with that said, this pick to me would have been a lot better if it was Jacoby Brissett, but the Patriots jumped him and took him, or they took him ahead of him, I should say. So maybe Kessler was higher rated on the board, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But I thought there were better quarterbacks they could have taken. But if he's a long-term backup, is it the worst thing in the world you spend a late third-round pick on him? I don't know, especially with all the draft picks you had to play with. And then the Buffalo Bills, getting Shaq Lawson to fall to him at number 19. Going up and getting Reggie Ragland. Do I agree with necessarily giving up a 4th this year and next year to go get Ragland? No, but he seems like a Rex Ryan type of inside linebacker, especially if they're getting ready to transition to a 3-4. Ragland makes a lot of sense for them there. Good value, and really good value again in round 3 with Adolphus Washington. 3 solid picks for the front 7 of that defense for the Buffalo Bills. In general, I thought job well done. In particular, staying away from the temptation of drafting somebody like a Christian Hackenberg or a Connor Cook. That was not the way for them to go in this draft, and they didn't go that way. They went the way that they needed to go. Now, in terms of the teams, to me, that had the worst first 2 days, the Rams got Jared Goff, and the Eagles got Carson Wentz, but the Rams had no day 2 picks. The Eagles had 1 day 2 pick that they ended up spending on a center. Samalo, was it, from Oregon State? At that point in time where they were on the board, to me, C.J. Prosise should have been the guy. So I thought they made a bit of a mistake there, but they did have to improve on their offensive line. But it's just, when you sit there and you give up that much to go up to 1, to go up to 2 to get a quarterback, you're really risking a lot, and you better pray to God that that quarterback pans out. I look at New England. They had no first rounder because of Deflategate, so obviously that hurts them a little bit. They had to trade Chandler Jones away to get an additional second-round pick. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that philosophy. You look at some of the picks they have. I like Cyrus Jones. He's a starting nickel corner for them, so that wasn't a bad pick. John Thuney, Thuney was a solid guard prospect, but they really needed a tackle prospect, so I thought that was a bit of a miss there. Taking Jacoby Brissett was probably a big surprise here because you're looking at Brissett and you're saying they already have Garoppolo. Why are they spending a third-round pick on a quarterback that's probably not going to see the field for potentially years? Maybe it means they're not sold on Garoppolo. I don't know. I just thought New England could have done better. Carolina, when you look at the entirety of the package, this is one of these drafts where I look at it now and it doesn't look that good. It'd probably look better down the road. But Vernon Butler, James Bradbury, and then trading up like they did to get Daryl Worley, not the sexiest draft for sure. And I'm just not sure if I agree with the picks. But like I said, in full interest of full disclosure, probably one we'll look back on and say, okay, well, they might have gotten that right. And based off of Gettleman and his results so far in the draft, I will give him some of the benefit of the doubt. To me, the team that had the worst first 2 days, honestly, was the Tennessee Titans. And you have to look at the entirety of the big picture here to understand what I mean. This is a team that traded down from 1 to 15, got a huge haul in terms of draft picks. But it's about what you do with it in part that I think is so important. They traded up from 15 to 8, giving up pick 76 and a second rounder next year to go get a right tackle in Jack Conklin, whereas Laramie Tunsil, a guy that they were strongly considering a month ago to take number 1 overall, was still sitting there on the board at number 8. I thought that was a massive mistake because if you're going to take the right tackle, then just stay tight at pick 15 and take Taylor Decker. I'm just saying. But the fact then, with all this additional draft pick currency, similar to the Cleveland Browns, I thought was a bit of a mistake too, but especially for the Tennessee Titans, to not peel back up into the bottom end of round number 1. Talk about trade partners and this and that. At the end of the day, they just didn't get it done, and they should have gotten it done. I didn't like how they utilized the draft pick currency that they had already amassed. They didn't go up and get a second first rounder. They didn't peel back at all in rounds 2 or 3 to get additional picks. At this point in time, you're already still sitting in a really good position in this draft. You've got 3 second rounders. You've still got a high third rounder. Why not try to take 1 or 2 of those picks and build them into draft pick currency for 2017? Maybe get yourself an additional second rounder, maybe at worst case a third and a fourth rounder. To me, that's what I would be looking to do here. So I didn't really like how they did this. And then when you look at a team like Tennessee, picking so high, second pick in round number 2, you've got the luxury of being able to gamble because of all this draft pick currency you have amassed from moving down from 1 to 15. And even after peeling up from 15 to 8, you still have a lot of draft pick currency there. Why would you pass on Jaylon Smith and Myles Jack? I don't get it. I don't understand it. I mean, I like Kevin Dodd. I like Austin Johnson. I like Derrick Henry. I don't know if I like Derrick Henry for them based off of their situation, their circumstance, and the draft position. I just didn't like the way the Tennessee Titans did it. And now, to top this all off, let's talk about the worst picks from this day 2 of the draft. I got to go with Christian Hackenberg for the Jets. Not a second-round talent to me. Cody Kessler to Cleveland. Not a third-round talent to me. Leonte Carew from Miami. Third to fourth-round talent, yes. So where he went was about right. I don't like the thought of the Dolphins giving up a fourth-rounder this year and a fourth-rounder next year. Or, excuse me, a third and fourth-rounder next year to go get him when I thought there were still better talents at wide receivers still on the board. Derrick Henry to Tennessee. Some people will just say that they just traded for DeMarco Murray. Well, DeMarco Murray has had trouble throughout his career staying healthy. Furthermore, how long are you going to have DeMarco Murray? I just didn't like the Derrick Henry pick because I thought there were better players on the board. In particular, there was one running back that was a better fit for their system on the board in C.J. Process. It's not a terrible pick fundamentally. It's just I thought they could have done better. Daryl Worley for the Carolina Panthers, trading up in round 3 to get him. I didn't know that was necessary. Shalik Calhoun to Oakland, somebody I thought was more of a late round 4, early to mid round 5 type of talent. They took here at round 3. At least they run a 4-3, so he fits the system. It's not a horrendous pick, but again, I thought there were better players on the board. Deion Jones to Atlanta. If you wanted a linebacker with speed, then take the linebacker that actually plays with speed on film and in game situations like Darren Lee or Myles Jack. Don't sit there and draft Keanu Neal in round 1 and then come back and take Deion Jones in round 2. So the simple fact of the matter is he might have run fast in his 40 time, but he doesn't play that fast, and he most certainly has a lot to learn in terms of a linebacker because his instincts and play recognition absolutely stink. Fourth round talent, and the Falcons was a second straight round that they reached. I love their third round pick, Austin Hooper, so much more than I liked either one of their first two picks. And then, yes, we got to talk about a Roberto Aguayo, the kicker, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers trading up to get him in round number 2. A kicker. That's what everybody wants to say. I'm not surprised Aguayo went this high. A lot of you know I've done mock drafts having him in late round 2, early round 3. I knew with the increased importance of the extra point that he was going to go in that range, especially with how sure-footed of a kicker he is from 40 yards and in. 40-yard field goals and in, the guy is pretty much money, which pretty much means you don't have to worry about him missing a lot of extra points. My problem with this pick is that they did trade up, give up a 4th rounder to move up to take a kicker. Furthermore, it's a kicker that doesn't have an incredibly strong leg. His accuracy really dips and suffers once he gets outside of 40 yards. And if I'm taking a kicker that high, I want a kicker with special leg talent. 40 yards and in, I think he has special leg talent in terms of accuracy, but overall, he doesn't have special leg strength. He doesn't have the overall special leg talent that I would want out of a kicker in round 2. Now, to me, again, the fundamental problem is not taking the kicker in round 2. It's trading up for him and trading up for a guy that doesn't have an incredibly strong arm, who once the field goals are longer than 40 yards, his accuracy dips quite a bit. And you look at the history of the last few kickers that were taken in round 1 or round 2. You go back to Jason Hanson in 1992. Obviously, that worked out. That absolutely worked out for the Detroit Lions. You'd make that pick 100 out of 100 times. If you don't, you're stupid. Especially from that weak-ass draft class that was 92. You look at Sebastian Janikowski in, 1999. He's not special, but he's still there. I mean, most of the other first-round picks out of his draft, I think all of them, are no longer in the league. He still is. So there have been a lot worse first-round picks the Raiders have made, I assure you. You look at Mike Nugent in 2005 to the New York Jets. People sit there, well, Nugent's been a solid kicker. Yeah, you also got to remember that after that 4 years, he left the Jets. He got cut by a couple of teams before he finally came back with the Cincinnati Bengals. But then you look at that draft, Robbie Gould was undrafted out of Penn State. Who's been the better kicker? So I guess it depends on the perspective. I just don't like the thought of trading up for a guy that doesn't have special explosive leg talent in terms of pure leg strength. I like the accuracy. I'm okay with if you took him in the 3rd round and you're not giving up a 4th round pick to go get him. But if he's your kicker for 12, 15 years, everybody will look back on it and they'll forget all about it and be like, hey, you know what, that ended up being a solid pick. So we've still got some good players on the board. Who's left? Andrew Billings is my top remaining player on the board. Victor Ochi, the edge rusher from Stony Brook. I'm actually surprised somebody didn't gamble on him in round 3. Antonio Morrison is still on the board, the linebacker from Florida. Jarrell Adams, the tight end from South Carolina. Kyle Murphy, the tackle from Stanford. Rashad Higgins, the wide receiver from Colorado State. Jordan Payton, the wide receiver from UCLA. Paul Perkins, the running back from UCLA. Alex Collins, the running back from Arkansas. There's still some good talent on the board for day number 3. I expect it to be a draft day that's heavy on quarterbacks and running backs and wide receivers. Now with defensive talent going so prevalently in the first 3 rounds, you're going to see day 3 focus, I think, a lot on the offensive side of the ball, which is the way this draft should have played out. It will still be a fun day, and there's still talent to be had. There's still impact players to be found. It's just a matter of whose team's going to find them and how.